If you are planning on coming to Ecuador during the holidays, wait just a second. I have some things you need to know before coming to Ecuador. This includes both the entry requirements for the mainland and the Galapagos, information about movement restrictions, if quarantining is necessary or not, as well as my personal insight on whether it's safe to come to Ecuador or not, based on some of the things that I've seen over here. So make sure you stick around to the end to make sure you're 100% prepared if you're planning on coming to Ecuador for the holidays. So let's get this started. In order to enter the country, you need one of two things. The first is a negative COVID-19 RT-PCR test taken no more than 3 days before entering the country. The second is a vaccination card showing that you received the full dose of the COVID-19 vaccine 14 days before entering Ecuador. And just to clarify a bit on the 14 days, if you got your full dose of the COVID-19 vaccine and less than 14 days have passed, you will need to present a negative RT-PCR test. On the contrary, if 14 or more days have passed, then just the vaccination card is fine. And for those of you traveling from Europe, an EU digital vaccination booklet is just fine. Another thing to note, rapid antigen tests are no longer accepted for entry into Ecuador. The only test accepted is a negative RT-PCR test. There is one slight alternative. If you were diagnosed COVID positive, but at least more than a month has passed since you've had the symptoms, then you can present a medical certificate that guarantees that you're well and recovering in order to travel to Ecuador. Just don't lie, please. As much as you want to travel, that's no reason for you to risk the health of others.
Then there's also the declaration of the health of the traveler. iVisa seems like a fishy place to fill it out since you have to create an account and apparently link payment information, even though it says it has no cost. There's also the government website where you can fill it out digitally as well, and the site seems much more legit. But I highly recommend filling that out and also the physical form, since I read on an airline site that the physical form is necessary, but these rules change from time to time. So it's better to be safe than sorry. I'll leave the links to all three in the description below.
In case you plan to travel to the Galapagos, you still need to have your complete vaccination card or a negative RT-PCR test that was taken 72 hours before boarding the plane to Galapagos. And the count for this starts from the moment that you get your sample taken. The other requirement you need in order to go to the Galapagos is a transit control card. Most of the time you'll get this card from the tour operators that you're with, but if you plan on traveling by yourself, then you might have to spend some extra time at the airport getting that transit control card. In terms of movement restrictions, I'm happy to say that in comparison to April, there are none. There is no longer a curfew in Ecuador, but there are some provinces with conditions in regards to movement from city to city. These are mainly related to the quantity of passengers that can travel in public transportation at a time. So as long as you plan beforehand or travel in private or personal transportation, then you should be fine. A few months ago, when you entered Ecuador, you were forced to quarantine or self-isolate yourself, but that is no longer necessary. The only exceptions to this are as follows. If you are a passenger whose point of origin is India, or if you transit India on your way to Ecuador, then you have to take a diagnostic test for COVID-19. And after you take this test, you must go through preventative isolation for 10 days. And this is regardless of whether the results of your test are positive or negative. The isolation can be done at any home that you own over here or any accommodation that you desire, but all expenses are yours. The other reason you may be forced to quarantine is if you arrive and you present symptoms of COVID-19. Ministry of Health personnel will be monitoring to make sure if anyone presents any symptoms, and they will conduct rapid antigen tests to people who they consider require them. And if the tests come out positive, then the person will be forced to do preventative isolation for 10 days. Once again, this can be at their own home or any accommodation that they consider ideal. But in this case, if the test comes out negative, then you do not have to go through preventative isolation. From what I was able to see during the Halloween event and from going around the city, it is definitely a much better time to come to Ecuador now than it was in April. In April, everything was just restriction over restriction, but now everything seems to be a lot more free. People are going out a lot more, and they're able to do a ton more things. If you were planning on coming over here with the hopes of interaction, that's also a lot more readily available now, since bars, discos, and other places are now more readily open. Although I'd say there's still the disadvantage where people have to wear the face masks, so if that still makes you feel kind of uncomfortable, then you might not want to come yet. But if you were just coming to Ecuador to check out the sights and have fun, then that's perfectly fine. And if you were planning on staying in Ecuador for a prolonged period of time, you might want to see how much you need in order to stay in Ecuador. You can check that out in this video over here. And that's it, guys. I hope you take care, prepare to travel, and as always, ace out.